My name is Josephine, and I am 68 years old. For most of my life, I sat at a sewing machine until the needles sang and my eyes blurred, or knelt on floors that did not belong to me, scrubbing away other people's spills until the water in the bucket turned the color of old tea. The kitchen this morning smelled of warm wood and onion gently browning. Flour dust clung to the fine lines of my hands like pale chalk. I was rolling dough for lunch, quiet, ordinary, almost happy, when a sentence split the house from the inside. "Honey, use Mom's card. She's got like 130,000 on it." There are words that feel like the floor just opened under your feet. You're standing exactly where you were, but your heart is suddenly a story lower. The rolling pin clacked against the counter. On the other side of the wall was my son Edward, an engineer, the baby I carried for 9 months and raised alone after his father walked away. Beside him sat Grace, his wife, the kind of woman whose voice was always honeyed on the surface, but, if you listened long enough, hid small stones underneath. "Are you sure, sweetie? She won't get mad?" Grace asked with that sweet little ask tone I'd learned to recognize. "My mom won't say a thing," Edward replied, casual as whistling. "She lives here for free, eats our food, uses our utilities. It's the least she can do. Besides, she's old. What does she need that money for? We've got a life to build." My heart pounded loud enough to hear. I had cried many times in this house when I sold my tiny 2-bedroom apartment and handed $50,000 to Edward for his down payment. "A loan, Mom. I'll pay you back in 2 years when I get a raise." 2 years became 5, then 10, then 20. The promise turned to a shadow with no shape. I thought about every single dollar in that $130,000 I had saved. The graveyard shifts at the sewing workshop, the Sunday rest days I spent cleaning rich people's houses. For $50 per 8 hours, 3 houses in a day, coming home with bleach on my skin and tremble in my wrists. I thought of the envelope under my mattress, the rice and beans weeks, the shoes I never bought. It was never about luxury. It was about one modest place with my name on the deed, a door that locked with my key, so no one could call me a freeloader in a house I helped buy. I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, freckled, dusted with flour. People like to say an older mother should be content in her children's home. But here, content had become another word for invisible. Cook, wash, iron, all without pay, then hand over my $500 monthly pension in full, keeping not a cent. Living for free had quietly become working for free. In many families, helping out is written in invisible ink. The help is seen, the value never accounted for. Keys jingled. Grace's brisk footsteps drew near the kitchen. I smoothed the dough and steadied my breathing the way a seamstress steadies her last stitch. "I'm off to the mall, Josephine. Need anything?" She called, public polite, like we were girlfriends. I kept my back to her, kept my voice as flat as the countertop. "No, thank you." I didn't want her to see my face, not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't going to give her the gift of my tears. The door closed. An engine turned over. The sound faded down the street. I sank into the old wooden chair in the kitchen I'd polished with the oil of my own hands. By the window, sunlight rested on the tomato vines I'd coaxed from seeds and the roses I'd planted one by one. They grew because I tended them, even in a yard my son insisted was his. The house had 4 bedrooms, a TV room, a formal dining room for guests, and Edward's private office where no one else could step. My room, 10 feet by 10 feet, had once been a pantry, a narrow single bed, a small closet, a wobbly nightstand. It seemed an elder mother's place was expected to be the size of a cupboard. She's old. What does she need money for? Those words burrowed deep. Old does not mean dreamless. Old is not a permission slip for others to spend what you earned. Old is hair turning silver. Dignity has no age. If I stayed, I would remain the shadow that cooked. If I stayed silent, the card would swipe, and my small apartment dream would evaporate on a conveyor belt alongside a cart full of things I hadn't chosen. I understood at last why so many elders fear living alone. They have been trained to believe that leaving equals dying by inches. But there is another kind of death, suffocating inside a home that leaves no space for you as a person. I heard Edward enter the kitchen, a glass at the water filter. He didn't look at me. Is lunch almost ready, Mom? I've got a 3 o'clock meeting. It was not a question. It was a command with sugar on it. Almost, I said. He added, eyes still on his phone. Oh, and Grace went to the mall. We need a few things for the house. I didn't answer. I pressed my palms into the dough harder than necessary. In the dough, I was shaping something else, a boundary. Did you hear me, Mom? He snapped when my silence lengthened. I turned and looked into the eyes that had once seen me with wonder, now clouded with hurry. I heard, "Any problem?" The words landed like a pre-printed label, troublemaker. I wanted to list the ledger. No, I don't live for free. I hand you my pension. I cook and clean and keep this place running for $0. I gave you $50,000 you never repaid. But I only said, I understand, and returned to my dough. I had already decided. When he left the kitchen, I rose and washed my hands. Cool water lifted the cling of flour. It also rinsed away the fear that had grown roots. I dried my fingers slowly. These hands had stitched strangers' wedding dresses and scrubbed floors that would never be mine. These same hands, today, would protect what belongs to me, not to punish my son, but to rescue myself. A breeze shivered the wind chime, and it rang like needles touching on glass, a clean, steady rhythm. I walked to my small room and closed the door. I looked at the single bed pushed to the wall, the best fit Edward had offered when I moved in, saying a larger bed wouldn't suit such a small room. I looked at the thin closet, the nicked nightstand, the life designed to be just enough to exist. I didn't want to merely exist anymore. I wanted to live. Out there, Grace was pushing a shopping cart with my card in her purse and a pin my son had given her. Any minute, at the register, the machine would ask, "Are you sure?" I wanted to be the one to answer that question, not the machine, not my daughter-in-law with the smooth voice, not my son who had forgotten that his mother is a person, not a wallet. I set my palm on my old phone. The same fingertips that had so often touched bleach and frayed fabric would touch something new today, authority. In the kitchen, soup simmered low. On the table, the dough rested. Inside me, Another door opened. No tears, no gulps of breath. I lifted the phone, my mind reciting the bank's number the way it had recited hymn verses and sewing measurements for 30 years. I didn't know exactly what my life looked like beyond this call. But I knew this: I would not let anyone swipe my life clean. I dialed. The ring pulsed steady. On the other end, a stranger would soon say hello. On this end, a 68-year-old woman was about to save herself. For the first time in a very long time, I felt a key inside my chest. Not a key to someone else's house, a key to mine. I dialed the bank with the same steadiness I save for threading a needle. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then, National Bank. Good morning, this is Linda. How may I help you? A kind, professional cadence, like a hand held out. I need to block my debit card immediately, I said, surprised at how even my voice sounded. Of course, ma'am. May I have your full name and account number? I gave them, then answered security questions I'd half memorized from years of penny deposits, the street I lived on in 1987, the name of my first school, my date of birth. There was a soft pause on the line, the clicking of a keyboard, the small bureaucratic music of someone doing their job. Thank you, Mrs. Josephine. Was the card lost or stolen? Let's say someone has it without my authorization. Understood. I'm blocking it now. Another pause. All set. From this moment, no transactions can be made. Would you like a replacement card mailed to your address? No, I said quickly. I'll pick it up at the branch next week. Noted. Time of block is 11:25 m. Anything else I can help you with? No. That's everything. Thank you. I ended the call with hands that shook only after I hung up. In the kitchen, the soup still whispered at a simmer. On the table, the dough had relaxed. Inside me, something unclenched too. I had not punished anyone. I had protected what was mine. It didn't take long for the echo to reach the house. First, Edward's voice in the living room, calm, then brittle. What do you mean it's blocked? That's impossible. My mom never blocks anything. She doesn't even know how to use those bank things. The old underestimation would have stung yesterday. Today it sounded like a bell that marked a lesson beginning. A beat. Grace, wait, let me call my mom. Then the quick steps down the hall, the knock on my door that tried to sound polite and landed like a demand. Mom, are you in there? I need to talk to you urgently. Coming, I said, letting a few seconds pass so I wouldn't open as if summoned. When I unlatched the door, Edward stood there with his phone in his hand and a face pressed between panic and offense. Grace is at the mall. Your card isn't working. It says it's blocked. Did you block it? No preface, no greeting. Straight to the point where my existence intersected his convenience. Yes, I said. I blocked it. What? Why would you do that? His voice rose, as if I had cut the electricity to a hospital. She's at the checkout with a cart full of things. She's being humiliated. I didn't give her permission to use my card. That money is mine. Mom, don't start with that now. It's just a few things we need for the house. It's not a big deal. Then, with the tone he used in meetings, call the bank and unblock it. Right now. No, I said. He blinked, stunned, as if the word were a language he hadn't heard in 20 years. What do you mean, no? Do you have any idea Grace has $82,000 worth of purchases in that cart? 82,000, I repeated, letting the number pass through my mouth and hang in the air. Of my money. Without asking me. It's for the house, Mom. A new TV, a living room set, appliances we need to replace. It's not like it's just for her. I did not authorize those expenses. I saved that money for 40 years. It's not family money. It's my money. He folded his arms across his chest, the way boys do when they want to look taller. You live here. You use electricity, water, gas, internet. All of that costs money. Or you think it's free. It's only fair that you contribute. I give you my entire $500 pension every month, I said, and I could hear my own breath steadying. 2. I cook, clean, wash, and iron. Isn't that contribution? That $500 doesn't even cover your food. Mom, you're being selfish. You have $130,000 sitting there doing nothing. What do you need it for at your age? There it was, the blade he thought was logic. At my age means you no longer deserve the dignity of a plan. The words pricked, but they did not pierce. That money is to buy my own apartment and stop being a burden to you, I said. His eyes flared, not because he understood, but because my sentence rearranged the furniture in his head. What are you talking about? Nobody said you're a burden. You said it this morning, I replied, keeping my tone plain. You told Grace I live here for free, that I eat your food, that I use your utilities, that I'm old and don't need money. Color went out of his cheeks. His mouth opened, shut, opened. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it. And right now, you care more about Grace being embarrassed at a register than the fact that she tried to spend $82,000 of my savings. I stepped back into my room. Tell Grace to come home. The three of us need to talk. He stood there, phone limp at his side, as if I'd swapped the script mid-scene. Mom, please just unblock it for today. We'll talk later. No. We'll talk now. Half an hour later, the storm hit. The front door slammed so hard that the picture frames in the hallway rattled. Heels pounded the hardwood like a countdown. Where is your mother? Grace's voice lanced the living room. Edward tried a peacekeeper's tone. Let's talk calmly. Calmly. Grace's face was fever-flushed, hair perfect, fury tighter than her dress. Your mother put me through the biggest humiliation of my life. 20 people were watching while the cashier swiped and swiped. The manager came. I had to leave everything and walk out. I didn't embarrass you, I said, entering the room and taking my place in the lone armchair I was allowed to sit in. You embarrassed yourself by trying to spend $82,000 of my money without permission. It's not just your money. This is a family, she snapped, stepping toward me. Families share. I am not your family, I replied, tone even. I am Edward's mother, and my money is mine. I earned it. I saved it. I decide what to do with it. Mom, please, Edward cut in, grasping for the middle. The TV is 8 years old. The couch is worn. The fridge makes weird noises. These are things we need. Then buy them with your money, I said. You're an engineer. Grace works at a clothing store. You have 2 salaries. Why do you need mine? Because this house doesn't maintain itself, Grace said, slipping into righteous arithmetic. Mortgage $200, utilities $300, food $500, internet, phones, car insurance, it all adds up. There's nothing left at the end of the month, while you sit on $130,000. I give you $500 every month, I answered. That helps. 500 is nothing, she shot back, contempt like vinegar. It barely covers your food. Then let me go, I said. Let me buy my apartment with my money and stop being a burden to you. For a fraction of a second, they glanced at each other, a quick, silent exchange I couldn't read yet. Then Edward pasted on the words, "This is your home, Mom." "This is your house," I corrected. "I just live here, in a pantry-sized room, on a single bed, on your schedule, on your terms." Grace folded her arms. "Be honest, Josephine. You have nowhere else to go. No other family. Your friends are in the same boat or worse. You'll end up alone in some sad little place, eating alone, watching TV alone, dying alone. Is that what you want?" Her words tried to land like slaps. They used to work. Tonight, they sounded like sales pitches for a prison you decorate yourself. "I'd rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and miserable," I said. "I have given 2 decades of cooking, scrubbing, and handing over my pension. You call that living here for free. I call it work with no wage." "That's not work," Grace sneered. "Washing some dishes and sweeping a little? Anyone can do that." "Then hire anyone," I said, standing. "I'm leaving." Edward's voice snapped like a branch. "You're not going anywhere." "Stop being ridiculous." But even as he spoke, he knew the center had shifted. The card was blocked. The old script had burned at the register. I took a breath and kept it. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, calm as a bookkeeper. "I will make lunch. I will finish the day. Then I will pack what's mine. I will leave a key on the table and a note with my new address when I have it. You will not use my card. You will not speak about me as if I am a bill to be paid. And you will not decide my future." Grace scoffed. "We'll see." "We will," I said. "Sooner than you think." I walked back to the kitchen and turned off the soup. The house sat very still, the kind of stillness a room takes on when a truth has been spoken and can't be unsaid. In that quiet, something settled inside me, heavy and right, like a key finding its lock. At dawn, the kitchen was the only room that believed in beginnings. I moved through it quietly, muscle memory doing its old choreography, coffee burbling to a soft hum, soup reheated for lunch, bread set to warm in the oven. There was a sweetness in the routine, something like muscle loyalty, and I honored it one last time. I set the table as I always did, 3 plates, 3 forks, napkins folded into subdued triangles. Then I stood in my pantry-sized room and pulled down 2 scuffed suitcases, the kind that remember bus stations and waiting rooms. Folding was easy. Choosing was not. I laid my life out in tidy layers, modest dresses, 2 sweaters, sturdy shoes, a winter coat I'd mended twice at the elbows, thick socks because old knees prefer kindness. I added a folder with documents that mattered, birth certificate, bank papers, social security letters, my seamstress certifications, a photocopy of the check I had written years ago to Edward labeled Loan $50,000. In a wooden box, I gathered the small brightnesses, my mother's wedding ring, silver earrings from my sister, the thin chain bought with my first paycheck, a faded photograph of me at 22, grinning in front of a sewing machine that looked like a small ship. I wrote the note last. Edward, I'm leaving. I cannot keep living in a house where my value is measured in money and chores. Thank you for the shelter these years, but I need my dignity back. I love you, but I love myself more. Mom. I read it twice, felt the truth settle, then set it beneath the house keys on the dining table, the same table where I'd ironed napkins flat enough to pass for respect. The neighborhood was liminal at that hour, not yet fully awake. When I stepped outside with my suitcases, the air had the clean chill of a sink just rinsed. Next door, Ernest stood in his robe watering his roses, the way he had every morning since the year the big oak came down. He peered over the low hedge and smiled. Morning, Josephine? Going on a trip? Something like that, Mr. Ernest, I said, and the words tasted both gentle and exact. He nodded, as though he knew what I did not say. You take care now. Worlds kinder than it looks from a distance. A taxi arrived. The driver, a man about my Edward's age, jumped out and lifted my bags with polite economy. Where to, ma'am? He asked. I gave him Linda's address. As we pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the house I had polished into a stranger. The curtains were still, the yard trim, the door shut like a mouth that never learned please or thank you. I waited for grief to crash in. Strangely, what rose was less like sorrow and more like oxygen. The city unspooled outside the window, dog walkers, a bakery pulling racks to the sidewalk, a bus kneeling for an old man with a cane. It was all the same city I had moved through for decades, but the edges looked newly drawn, like someone had gone over the lines with a darker pencil. I realized leaving is not only distance, it is focus. Linda was waiting at her building's gate, cardigan hitched tight, a hair pinned back, in a style she called her getting things done head. We had met 40 years earlier on the factory floor, two women in aprons, passing spools and thread, conversations and advice, a friendship stitched on lunch breaks and night shifts. When she saw the suitcases, she opened her arms with a precision that felt like home. You're here, she said into my shoulder. You're safe. Her apartment was one-bedroom modest, a small living dining room, a narrow kitchen with enamel that had earned its chips, a bathroom where everything closed properly, a bedroom with a bed made with hospital corners. More than space, it had peace, that rare quiet you only find in rooms where nobody keeps score. Your bed is the sofa bed, she said, pulling the handle with the competence of a magician revealing a rabbit. Fresh sheets, new pillow. You can put your things in half my closet. We'll get you hangers. She moved around the room as if assigning rights. Not privileges. Rights. I can't impose, I began, the old script tugging at my tongue. You're not imposing. You're staying, she said. And tomorrow we're going to look at apartments. It's not a suggestion. It's an order. We put the suitcase things away in quiet industry. She kept a running commentary to steady me. If it doesn't have an elevator, we don't take it. Your knees have opinions. Light is non-negotiable. We want a building with decent maintenance, no damp in the halls. You should see the park across from my cousin's place. Oh, and a good bus line. Peace isn't peace if you can't reach the pharmacy. When we sat at last, with the sofa bed converted to a couch again, my documents stacked in a clean plastic folder she had fished from a drawer, Linda made tea and set it on the table without coasters. "You'll turn your phone off," she said, not asked. "Not forever. Just long enough to think without their voices in your head." I pulled the old phone from my pocket. The screen had already lit up with a version of worry that always came with instructions. I powered it down. The apartment exhaled. I did, too. We carried our cups onto the narrow balcony that overlooked a small tangle of city life, laundry strung between windows like flags from countries nobody visits, a boy practicing a basketball dribble with one hand while eating a pastry with the other, a woman watering basil in a cracked blue pot. Linda tipped her chin toward the world. "You see? Nobody's dying of being alone. They're living." Sometimes that's harder to learn than sewing French seams. I laughed, and the sound surprised me, lighter than I remembered my laugh could be. "Do you think I was selfish to leave?" I asked, the leftover fear making one last bid. "Selfish?" She tilted her head as though I had spoken a foreign word. "Let me tell you what selfish is. Expecting a woman to erase herself to make your life easier. What you did is self-respect. That's the only soil where love grows back." We planned as the sky unspooled from blue to pewter. We made a list on the back of an envelope because we were factory women and envelopes were our whiteboards. Criteria: second or third floor, preferably with elevator, windows that faced something alive, not a wall, safe lobby, lights that work, a superintendent who returns calls, about 650 square feet, enough to move, not enough to get lost, monthly building fees around $100. We could stretch a little if the building was sound. Asking price near $55,000. Low noise. A corner for a small table by a window where morning light could find me. Process: visit 5 places tomorrow. If one is right, leave a small earnest check. Call a lawyer on Monday. No mortgages, cash. So the roof over my head belongs only to me. Pick up the replacement bank card at the branch, not the mailbox at the house. After tea, she heated a pot of soup and sliced bread she'd bought that morning. We ate at the tiny table, the spoons clinking softly, the clock on the wall keeping patient time. The food tasted like something more than food, like an ending stitched neatly to a beginning. Later, we washed dishes shoulder to shoulder. We had washed many dishes together, our own, our employers, our sons. Doing it here, in this simple kitchen, it felt like we were finally washing only ours. That night, on the sofa bed with the fresh sheets, linen that smelled faintly of sun and air, I waited to feel the old lurch of panic. Footsteps did not stop at my door because there was no door for footsteps to stop at. No voices outside called for more salt, more towels, more of me. I fell asleep with my palm on the envelope of criteria as though it were a passport. Morning came with a small parade of ordinary mercies, a kettle's soft whistle, toast that did not burn, the sun angling across the floor like a cat stretching. Linda handed me coffee and the newspaper. Apartments, she said, tapping a column. We circled 5. One ad bragged about new paint over old problems. Linda drew a skull and crossbones next to it. Honesty only, she declared. We stepped out into a city that looked the same but behaved differently. Everything seemed to receive me rather than require me. On the way to the bus, Linda pointed at a building. See that? No ramp. They'll never fix the big things if they ignore the small ones. This is what life with a friend is. Someone to read the street with you. Between appointments, I found us looking at the world with a new arithmetic. How many windows? Which way does the light fall at 4 p.m.? Is there a park within the distance my knees will tolerate? Where will the bed go so the first thing I see is not a wall? Practical questions that felt like love in another language. By midday we had seen a gloomy first floor that smelled of damp, a second-floor walk-up with a narrow stairs and a landlady who talked too fast, and a place so bright it felt like a promise, until we learned the plumbing wept behind a cheerful coat of paint. We kept going. Persistence is a factory skill. At a little cafe, we split a sandwich and made notes on the back of a second envelope. I forgot how good it feels to plan for myself, I said, wiping crumbs from my fingers. That feeling has a name, Linda said. It's called freedom. I nodded, the word rising through me like a small, bright fever. I was not naive. I knew there would be paperwork and fees and fatigue. I knew Edward's messages would shift from pleading to angry to calculating. But the truth had already moved in and put its feet under my table. I could live alone and not be lonely. I could have a door that closed and opened on my decision. I could take the key in my chest and find the lock it was made for. On our way to the 4th appointment, my phone trembled in my pocket with a phantom buzz I'd imagined. I left it there, quiet. Outside, a gust of wind rattled a string of aluminum pan lids someone had hung as chimes. They clanged not prettily, but honestly. I preferred the sound. Ready? Linda asked as we reached the next building. Ready, I said, and meant it. We found the 5th place almost by accident, the way you find a good seam after unpicking 3 bad ones. The building wasn't glossy, it was tended. A small lobby with clean tile, a bulletin board with neat notices, a potted plant that had not given up hope. A super's number taped at eye level with a note. If I don't pick up, I will call you back. Promises are cheap, callbacks are currency. The elevator hummed like a content cat, no clanks, no groans. We got off at the 2nd floor, and the hallway smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something like fresh bread. The door to the unit was plain, a good sign. The owner, Mr. Benjamin, opened it with the smile of a man who neither oversold nor apologized. Come in, ladies, he said. Take your time. Light met us first, honest, unfiltered light, pouring through a wide window that framed a small park like a painting. Trees, a swing set, a path where a woman walked a dog who was sure the world belonged to him. The living room was modest, rectangular, with floors that had been refinished rather than covered. The kitchen was open to it, not fancy, but everything fit. A full stove, a reliable refrigerator, cabinets that closed with a decent thud. The bedroom had a closet with rails that did not wobble. The bathroom was clean and practical. The grout told the truth. Off the back, a short hallway delivered two small kindnesses. A storage unit in the basement and a parking space downstairs included. "How big is it?" I asked, already knowing by the way my shoulders relaxed. "About 650 square feet, Mr. T. Benjamin said. "The building is 6 floors, well maintained. HOA is $100 a month, covers basic maintenance, hallway lights, garbage, minor repairs. No special assessments pending. The previous owner lived here 20 years, only moved to live with her daughter abroad." He didn't breathe the words good energy, but the room said them for him. I walked to the window and placed my palm on the sill, the way I would test cloth at the market. Does it carry? Does it drape? Will it last a season of wear? The light sat on my skin as if it had been waiting. "How much are you asking?" Linda asked, already pulling an envelope and pen from her bag, like an experienced broker's assistant. 55,000, he said. "Firm. Includes the parking and storage." Linda's eyebrows rose, not with skepticism, but with the awareness that numbers had just aligned. We looked around again, slower this time, the way you reread a paragraph, when you realize it might change the story. "Could I walk it once?" I asked, a ritual I didn't know I had until the words arrived. "Mr. Benjamin nodded and stepped aside. I traced the path of my future with small steps. Bed here, so morning would find my face. Table by the front window, so tea could keep the park company. A shelf for books against that wall where the plaster sat smooth. A hook by the door for the old cardigan I reach for without looking. A place on the counter for the kettle that would know my hands. Every spot I touched held. "I'd like to buy it," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice and the simple joy in the room's answering silence. "Mr. Benjamin smiled like a man who had heard 10 people say maybe and needed just one person to say yes. "We can do that," he said. "There's a bit of paperwork, of course. Do you have a lawyer, or would you like a recommendation?" "My cousin's son," Linda said. "Ferdinand." "Straight shooter? Fair fees?" "Perfect, Mr. Benjamin replied. "If you wish to take it off the market, a small earnest deposit holds it. We can begin the contract, and your attorney can perform due diligence, title, liens, the usual. If everything's clean, we can close in about a week." I opened my purse and withdrew the checkbook that had mostly written other people's stability. My hand trembled only a little as I wrote $5,000, money that represented not risk but arrival. Mr. Benjamin issued a receipt and a copy of the preliminary terms. "Congratulations," he said. "This is a good home." On the sidewalk, Linda grabbed my shoulders and shook me with the kindness of a sister. "You did it," she laughed. "You did it." "I did," I said, and the words warmed me from the inside like broth. We walked to a cafe, ordered 2 coffees, and let the moment seat itself. Only then did I turn my phone on. It woke like a dog too eager to be helpful, buzz after buzz. 32 missed calls from Edward, 17 from Grace, and a choir of texts. I scrolled. They began with worry. "Mom, where are you? Please answer." Shifted into reprimand. "This is ridiculous. Stop the drama." then a sour bloom of threats. If you don't answer, I'm going to the police. This is abuse toward us. You have nowhere to go. Come home. Linda read over my shoulder, her mouth flattening into a line. They're counting on the old music, she said. Let's change the song. I set the phone on the table and pulled a napkin toward me. Before I answer, I said, I want to see myself clearly. I wrote a list, not to weaponize, but to witness. Contributions, $50,000 loan for their down payment, 500-month pension for years, groceries paid on countless trips, utilities covered during rough spots, unpaid labor, cooking, cleaning, laundry, ironing, garden care, childcare favors when asked, the kind of vigilance that keeps a house from slipping, changing light bulbs, wiping leaks before they become bills, holding the calendar in my head. Withdrawals from me, the pantry room, the single bed, the free label, the names that weren't spoken but were felt. I totaled nothing. I just needed to stop calling my life free when it had never once been free. Then I typed, carefully, the way you measure twice before you cut. Edward, I am safe with a friend. Yesterday was the last straw in a pattern I cannot continue. I have made a decision for my mental health and dignity. I have placed a deposit on an apartment and will close next week. This is not a punishment for you. It is self-respect for me. When I am settled, I will send you my address so we can talk calmly. I love you, but I have to do this. Mom. The check marks turned blue. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. His reply came like a script he hoped still worked. You can't just buy an apartment like that. Who will take care of you? What if you get sick? Grace is very upset. You owe her an apology for the humiliation. Come home and we'll discuss like adults. I breathed once and answered, I am 68, not 98. I can take care of myself. I do not owe Grace an apology for blocking my own card when she tried to spend $82,000 without permission. If anyone should apologize, it is both of you. We will talk when I'm ready. I turned the phone off again. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks that you control. Monday morning, we put our plan into motion. Ferdinand, the lawyer, was exactly as Linda promised, careful eyes, short sentences. He spread the documents on his desk like a map. Title is clean, he said after a day of checks. No liens. Joey in good standing. Owner has authority to sell. We can schedule closing for Friday at 10:01. You intend to pay in cash? Yes, I said. I want no bank in my doorway. Then you'll need a cashier's check payable to the seller for $50,000 plus $5,000 for fees and taxes. Your $5,000 earnest will be deducted. Bring ID, and we'll go through each page together so you know exactly what you sign. From there, we walked to the bank, my bank, the one whose number my mouth could dial in the dark. A young teller with kind eyes and a nameplate that read Ramona greeted us. How can I help? She asked. I'd like a cashier's check for $55,000, I said. I'm buying my first home. Her face lit with surprise that softened into delight. That's beautiful, ma'am. Congratulations. We'll just verify the account and process the check. She leaned closer, lowered her voice. This is a considerable amount. Is there anyone pressuring you? We ask because scams. No scam, I said. with a dignity that felt new on my tongue and right in my spine. Just a woman buying a small life that belongs to her. Ramona smiled. My grandmother bought her place at 70 after leaving a marriage that didn't deserve her. Best decade of her life, she said. She slid forms toward me. I signed with a hand, steadier than it had been when I wrote the $5,000 check. The printer released the cashier's check with ceremonial slowness, thick paper that felt like it could hold a roof. We left the bank into a city that had not changed, and yet it had the same sidewalks, but the air felt like it recognized me. In my purse, the envelope rested with its small, legal weight. In my chest, the key I'd imagined in part 1 turned a notch. That evening, after we priced a used sofa at a garage sale and measured a spot where it would fit exactly, I allowed myself to turn my phone on for a minute. One new message from Edward. Grace and I can forget this misunderstanding if you apologize and come home today. The house isn't the same without you. Please don't make a mistake you can't reverse. I typed nothing. Some silences are not empty. They are full of choice. In bed, I stared at the ceiling and rehearsed the path to Friday. ID, check, signatures, keys. It felt like tracing the pattern for a dress I had always wanted to wear but could never afford to cut. I thought of the window by the park and the table where morning light would find me. My hands rested on the blanket, work creased and steady. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep planning my own life rather than managing someone else's. Friday dawned with the kind of light that makes even sidewalks look ceremonial. Linda and I dressed like women who knew the day would take a picture of them. She in her cream silk blouse, me in my best navy dress with the small white buttons that have never once fallen off. We reached Ferdinand's office at 9:45 a.m. Early on purpose. He had the papers laid out with the calm of someone who understands how to turn anxiety into sequence, contract, deed, affidavits, disclosures. Mr. Benjamin was already there, tidy as ever, a folder under his arm. He greeted us with a nod and a smile that held no tricks. Good morning, Mrs. Josephine, Ferdinand said. Ready to be a homeowner? Ready, I answered, and meant it in the bones. We sat. The work was careful and unhurried. Ferdinand explained each page in plain language, the sort of courtesy that feels like respect. He traced paragraphs with his pen, pausing when my eyes narrowed, answering questions I didn't know how to ask until the sentences gave me edges. My cashier's check, $55,000, rested in a white envelope by my hand, heavier than paper should be. When the moment came, I took it out and placed it on the table. Mr. Benjamin checked the name, nodded once, then slid it toward Ferdinand to process. Very good, Ferdinand said. We'll make a copy for the file. I signed so many documents I lost count. It felt a little like the old days, chain-stitching seam after seam, small motions adding up to something that would hold. At exactly 11:02 a.m., Ferdinand set down his pen. With this, the transaction is complete, he said, and handed me a thick envelope and a keychain with 3 keys. Deed, copies of disclosures, HOA bylaws, all fully executed. These are your keys. Congratulations on your new home. I took the keys as if they were alive. In a way, they were, 3 small pieces of cut metal that turned strangers' walls into mine. Something unclenched in my chest that had been tight for so long I'd almost called it normal. We stepped onto the street, and the city threw us confetti made of sun. "You did it," Linda practically sang, grabbing my hands. "You own it. At 68, you took your life back." She spun me once like we were 2 girls with nothing to do but be happy. People glanced over. An older woman paused, her grocery bag on her hip. "What are we celebrating?" she asked, smile already forming. "I just bought my first apartment," I told her, surprising myself with how proud the words sounded. The woman nodded, eyes bright. "It's never too late to open your own door," she said. "Blessings on your house," and moved on, leaving a soft benediction in her wake. We went straight to the building. My building. The elevator hummed its gentle hum. I unlocked the door with my new keys, and the click was the most beautiful sound, metal meeting fate. The apartment smelled as it had before, clean and faintly of wood, but now the air felt different. It had changed title along with the deed. I walked room to room, touching the walls. The window framed the park as if we had commissioned it that way. I stood at the sill and let the light find my face. Linda, practical as a drumbeat, tied her hair back. "We'll clean," she announced. "It's already clean, but this is the kind of clean that says, 'Welcome.'" We worked like the factory women we once were, sleeves pushed up, strokes efficient, jokes traded between tasks. We wiped every cabinet, swept and mopped, washed the windows until the trees outside looked almost inside. Linda produced rags, sponges, a bottle of cleaner that smelled like lemons and memory. By late afternoon, the apartment had a sheen that wasn't about shine, it was about attention. We locked up and walked to the flea market, where we'd seen a solid wood table for $80 and a set of pots for $30 the previous weekend. I bought both, the seller helping us load them into a cab. We deposited them in the building's storage for the night, my storage unit now, and made a short list for morning. "Ik counted. Tomorrow," Linda said, "we furnish a life." Saturday arrived with the energy of a move disguised as a party. Linda had called her niece Antonia, a strong-armed 30-year-old who worked for a moving company and laughed like a bell. She pulled up in a small truck with 2 friends from her crew, both cheerful, both wearing those back support belts that say, "I lift things, but I also plan to see 50. They helped us carry up the table by the window, the $120 sofa we'd negotiated at a garage sale, and the queen-size bed, $200, used but excellent, that made my little bedroom feel like a kingdom. We hung simple curtains, the kind that let light in but kept the world out, and set a slim bookcase against the wall for the few books and frames I owned. We placed the framed photographs, not many, but dear above the sofa, my sister's grin, my 22-year-old self beside that ship of a sewing machine, Linda and me in aprons, eyebrows raised at a joke we'd long forgotten. "Where do you want the armchair?" Antonia asked, hefting it like a cloud. "By the window," I said. "I think that's where my heart sits." They refused to charge the full move. "Any friend of my Aunt Linda is family," Antonia said, hands on hips. "Just pay us gas." I pressed $100 into her palm despite protests. "Then let me be a friend who pays for gas," I said, and she laughed, tucking the bill into her belt. By noon, the apartment had stopped being rooms and become a home. The kitchen gained a rhythm as Linda and I arranged plates, glasses, and cutlery in cabinets we'd already memorized. The pots sat stacked like patient soldiers. We assigned a drawer to the little things that keep a life glued together: rubber bands, tape, a pen that always writes. Linda wiped every shelf again for good measure and declared, "There. May every meal you cook here be for pleasure, not appeasement." She pulled from a bag a gift wrapped in tissue, a new set of sheets, soft, clean, a pale blue like optimistic sky. "So you start your new life with linens that belong only to the future," she said. I could not stop the tears, and for once there was no shame in letting them fall. They washed only gratitude. We made the first pot of tea in my kettle on my stove and drank it at my table by the window. Outside, the park did its unremarkable miracles: a toddler mastering a wobble, a couple arguing kindly about a dog's name, a boy flinging a frisbee with more hope than skill. Inside, the apartment held our quiet like a bowl. When evening came, Linda headed home, turning 3 times in the doorway as if reluctant to let the moment end. "You'll call if you need anything," she said. "I will," I promised, though what I needed most was exactly what I was about to have: a night alone in a place that did not thin me out to fit. I locked the door from the inside, an action more spiritual than practical, and walked through the lit rooms. I put on music soft enough to hear my thoughts breathing, took a bath without listening for footsteps, and changed into a nightgown that had always felt like borrowed relief. In the kitchen, I made tea and carried it to the armchair. The curtains breathed a little with the night air. The city was a set of distant murmurs, a bus sighing, someone laughing 2 buildings over, leaves rubbing their dry hands together. I felt none of the old vigilance. The air didn't taste like waiting. I cried then, but the kind of tears that bless. For the woman who had sold her apartment for a child's dream and waited 2 decades to admit the dream had left her in a pantry. For the hands that had scrubbed until they forgot they belonged to a person. For the key in my palm and the match it found in this lock. Mostly I cried, because peace is louder than noise once you have ears for it. Sunday arrived like a kind stranger who respects your sleep. I woke without an alarm, saw my own ceiling first, and thanked God for that small mercy. I brewed coffee and watched the park knit itself together out of morning light. Linda came at noon with a huge pot of chicken soup and a loaf of fresh bread from the bakery 3 blocks away. We ate at my table, the steam fogging the window edges, the soup tasting like history, hers, mine, ours. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll stock your fridge and buy a small lamp for that corner. And you'll learn the nearest bus times and the pharmacist's name. That's how you become local. You know a schedule and you're known by a clerk." We washed dishes, our dishes, while she told me about visiting her daughter next month. Then she left me to my afternoon. I took a slow walk around the block to measure my new world. There was a market 2 streets over with fresh vegetables. A bakery with loaves that made you forgive everything. A pharmacy on the corner run by a woman whose name, I would later learn, was also Grace, a different Grace, the kind spelling you the long way. I came home and sat in my window's square of sun and tried on a sentence I had not been able to say for 20 years. I am home. It fit. It fit like a dress that seems made for you because, in a way, you finally made it for yourself. You could call what I felt ordinary. I won't argue. But ordinary is what I had been denied. The right to a quiet room, to a door that closes, to tea cooling while you watch people you don't have to serve live their lives. Ordinary, in the right hands, is holy. That evening, I wrote a list on a fresh page, no more back of envelope for this one. House rules for myself, wake with kindness, open the window, eat at the table, not standing over the sink, say grace even when the food is simple, lock the door without apology, answer the phone only when I have the strength, spend from my savings on needs and a little on joy, keep flowers on the sill when I can, forgive often, but forget less, invite peace in daily, the way you invite light. Outside, a boy finally caught his frisbee without chasing it. He lifted his arms and whooped. I lifted my cup in his direction, a silent toast to tiny victories. Night unspooled slowly. No one called from the hallway. No one measured my worth in chores or withdrawals. I turned off the lamp when I wanted. I slept when I was ready. And when I turned the key in my door one last time before bed, I heard, clear as metal, mine. There's a moment every woman learns the difference between silence and being silenced. Mine arrived 2 nights before the closing, at Linda's buzzer, ringing like a fire drill. We were finishing dinner, simple rice with vegetables, 2 plates, easy conversation, when the intercom crackled. It's Edward. I need to speak to my mom. Linda looked at me the way good friends do. Questions, caution, and consent all in one glance. Let him up, I said, but stay with me. She nodded and crossed her arms in the doorway like a lighthouse. When he reached the landing, I barely recognized him. The polished engineer edges were dull. Dark crescents sat under his eyes. His shirt looked slept in. Mom, he said, voice wobbling as if it couldn't decide between anger and pleading. Edward, I answered, not moving aside. We'll talk here. He swallowed. This got out of control. I know Grace and I were wrong to take your card without asking, but leaving like that, without telling me where you were, that's cruel. I left a note, I said. Clear words, for once. Cruel was the plan to spend $82,000 of my savings. His face tightened. Then the old tactics lined up like soldiers. Minimize. Reframe. Control. It wasn't stealing. It was for the house. We're family. Families share. Families also ask, I said. Sharing is a door you knock on, not one you break. He blew out a breath and switched to logistics. Fine. But you can't just buy an apartment without consulting me. What if it's a scam? I need to check these things with you. I have a lawyer, I said. Ferdinand. We close Friday at 10 Emma. Title is clean. No liens. I am paying by cashier's check. I do not need your permission. His eyes flickered. Calculation, not care. I watched the thought assemble on his face before he spoke it. And the money, how much is left after you pay? There it was, the true visit, finally honest. That's none of your business, I said. I'm your son, he snapped. I have a right to know how you're managing your finances. At your age, you could make mistakes. At my age, I said, steady. I have 4 decades of practice not making them. He lifted his chin, tried a different knife. Doi, let's be honest. That money is also a little bit mine. I've supported you for 20 years, roof, food, utilities. If we did the math, I probably owe you little to nothing. From the living room, Linda's voice arrived like a seatbelt clicking. Young man, you need to go. Your mother has made her decision. You have no right to her money. He didn't look at her. This is between me and my mom. This is my home, Linda said. And my guest is not to be bullied at my door. He turned back to me, desperation curdling into insult. Grace was right about you, he said. Selfish. Always thinking about yourself. The words hit, because words from a child always do, even when the child is grown and wrong. I let them land and pass through. If that's what you believe, leaving is the kindest thing I can do for both of us, I said. You don't owe me space. I don't owe you access. He pointed at the hall, as if at a future he could still order. Go to your little apartment, then. But don't come running when you're sick or need help. Don't come back when you realize you've made a mistake. I set my hand on the doorframe. I hope you never need to learn this the way I did, I said. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's an open till. He flinched. For a heartbeat, the boy he'd been, knee-scraped, earnest, flickered behind the man who'd learned to call convenience love. I love you, Edward, I added, because truth belongs to me, too. I always will. But I can't spend my dignity to keep your peace. He left without answering. The elevator doors closed with a sigh that sounded like a book finally placed on the right shelf. I let myself cry into Linda's shoulder, not from doubt, but from the terrible arithmetic of motherhood. Sometimes you lose the thing you love to save the person who must love herself. Then came the closing, the keys, the move, the first night of tea and breathing. Days grew muscles. My life learned new steps, morning light at the window, the market 2 streets over, the bakery 3 blocks down, the pharmacy run by a different Grace whose kindness was as practical as bandages. I made Wednesday lunches with Linda, a holiday we observed weekly. I joined a knitting class at the community center, Women Like Me, remapping themselves stitch by stitch. I walked the park each morning, knees talking but cooperating, birds stitching sound into air. Weeks later, my phone buzzed with a number I knew and did not dread. Mom, it's me. I've been thinking. Grace and I are not good. She always wants more, money, things, status. I see now she treated you that way too. I don't expect forgiveness, but I understand why you left. I read it twice, then showed it to Linda as we set out bowls for soup. What will you do? She asked. Answer, I said, but with locks on the doors. I typed, thank you for your honesty. If you want to rebuild, we can, but it must be different. I have my own space and boundaries now. If you can respect them, we can start again. I love you, but I love myself more, too. He replied the next day, can I visit? just me. No Grace. We chose Sunday at 3 p.m. I cleaned like a woman welcoming a guest, not a judge. I baked something small and sweet, simple cookies from a recipe I knew by heart. I put the good cups on the table by the window and opened the curtains to let the park perform its quiet play. He arrived on time. When I opened the door, he stood there thinner, edges sanded by a month of thinking. His eyes held something new, not apology exactly, but humility's cousin. "Hi, Mom," he said, and the way his voice broke on Mom stitched something in me I didn't know was torn. "Hi, son," I answered, and we hugged. Not long enough to pretend the past hadn't happened. Long enough to say we might build something different. He walked slowly through the rooms, the way visitors do when they're trying to meet a person by reading her shelves. He touched the books, the curtains, the armchair by the window. "It feels like you," he said, and did not mean small. We sat. I poured coffee. He told the truth. About the fights with Grace that were really negotiations with her hunger. About how he was starting therapy, a word men in our family had always treated like a foreign language. "My therapist says I repeat patterns," he admitted. "That I let Grace diminish you because I wanted peace at home, the way Dad taught me to want quiet more than justice." "Your father left," I said, soft. "You stayed. Even the wrong way of staying is not the same as leaving. The fact that you can see a pattern means you can change it." "Can you forgive me?" he asked, eyes not flinching. "I already have," I said. "Forgiveness is for me." "But forgiveness isn't amnesia. We won't go back. We go forward with rules." "What are the rules?" he asked, like a man finally willing to read directions. I told him, "You don't use guilt as a lever. You don't speak to me as a bill to be paid. You do not talk about my money as community property. You visit because you want to, not because you need something. If you ever marry again, your partner understands I am not the housemaid or the cash drawer. And if I say no, it's a complete sentence." He nodded after each line, like a person taking notes on their own life. "I can do that," he said. He told me Grace had moved in with a cousin for a while. Then, months later, he told me they'd filed for divorce. I did not gloat. Some structures collapse because the beams were rot from the start. All you can do is step clear. He began to visit every other Sunday. We kept the ritual simple, coffee and something small, then a walk past the pharmacy where the other Grace waved, along the park where toddlers taught their parents patience, back to my building where the elevator hummed approval. Sometimes he brought oranges. Sometimes he brought silence and let it sit without trying to fix it. We told the truth in increments. He said I'm sorry more than once, but more important, he didn't make me drag it out of him. I let the trust grow slowly, the way you let a plant find the sun, without turning the pot every hour. One afternoon, Rain drum-fingered the window while he told me about a promotion he'd turned down, because it was a trap dressed as a prize, more money, fewer hours with himself. I want to learn to live at the pace where I can tell who I am, he said. That's a good wage, I answered. He laughed, surprised. A good wage. Time you can spend on purpose, I said. Best currency there is. By the time the leaves in the park browned and let go, our visits had a law of their own. He asked again, once, how much savings I had left, old reflex. I smiled and shook my head. He laughed, caught himself, and said, right. Not my business. Growth is often that simple. A stopped sentence, a nod to a boundary, a different next word. We didn't fix 20 years in one season. That's not how life works. But we moved from a house where I was useful to a home where I am respected. Some days, that difference shines like polish. Some days, it's quiet as good grout. One evening, as he put on his coat, he paused at the door. I think about that day at Linda's, he said. I hate how I sounded. I think about it too, I said. I'm glad we're both learning new music. He smiled. See you in 2 weeks? In 2 weeks, I said, and turned my key after he left, not to lock him out, but to keep myself in. 1 year later, I sit in the armchair by my window and watch the park perform its quiet theater. A dog loops into a joyous figure 8. A child concentrates on the art of not spilling a paper cup. A couple argues with tenderness, their hands saying what their mouths can't. In the kitchen, coffee cools to the right temperature. On the sideboard, the bowl of oranges looks like small suns. This is how peace moves when you let it, not with cymbals, but with a steady drum you only hear after the noise leaves. My apartment is paid in full. My $75,000 rests in the bank for emergencies and modest joys. My $500 pension covers the simple life I chose. There is no glamour here, only something rarer, enough. In the month since the keys warmed my palm, I have learned the city again at a human scale. Mornings, my knees and I greet the path around the park. He and I are partners now, united by compromise and a good stretch before the stairs. At noon on Wednesdays, Linda arrives with a clatter of kindness, and we make lunch a ritual that bows to nothing else. Soup when it's cold, tomatoes when they taste of August. Stories that have learned to unspool without needing to be important. On Saturdays, a classroom at the community center blooms with women our age and needles that sparkle under cheap fluorescent lights. We knit without apology. We pull back rows without shame. We tell truths in the language of yarn, because it turns out you can rework a life the way you rework a sleeve, patiently, awake to your own hands. I shop now with the intimate knowledge of nearby places. The market 2 streets over, where the woman with the stern bun slips me an extra handful of herbs for magic, she says. The bakery 3 blocks away that understands bread is forgiveness we can eat. The pharmacy on the corner where the other Grace, a good one, calls me by name and sets aside the brand I prefer before I ask. I know bus times and what time the light is best at my window. I know which neighbor waters plants on Tuesdays and which boy needs an encouraging nod on spelling test mornings. These are the measurements of a small, specific life, and if you think that's not abundance, try living without it. My relationship with Edward is no miracle, and that is its miracle. It is slow and made of human parts. He visits every other Sunday at 3, on time or texting if he's 5 minutes late. He brings oranges or nothing at all, and both are perfect. We drink coffee, sometimes with cookies, and he tells me what his therapist says about patterns, and I tell him what the sky said to me that morning about staying. He does not mention my savings. He does not hint for help or ask me to pick sides against his past. He listens, which may be the hardest art to learn if you were raised to win. He apologized more than once, but it's the changed behavior that counts. The way he asks if I have the energy to talk today, the way he does not turn my no into a negotiation, the way he understands my door is both invitation and boundary. 6 months after we began again, he told me he had filed for divorce. We did not celebrate or mourn. We regarded the fact. Some houses fall because somebody kicks them, some because the blueprints were lies. All you can do is step clear and build elsewhere. If you ask me what hurts, I'll tell you it still does. I would be lying to say the old griefs have packed up and moved out. Sometimes a smell knocks me back into the pantry room, or a phrase, lives here for free, climbs into my ear in the canned food aisle. But the difference is I don't set a place for the hurt at my table anymore. I let it visit, tell it it can stay until the tea is finished, and then I escort it to the door, polite but firm. This too is a house rule now. I have thought a lot about debts in these months, who owes what to whom. The night I left, I wrote a note that said I loved my son, but I loved myself more. I read it again sometimes to check, was that selfish? The world trains mothers to answer yes. But to love a child without loving the person who keeps that child alive, that is the arithmetic that breaks families quietly. When I took my love back to the bank of myself, I did not foreclose on him. I funded a roof. I repaired a foundation. I made a room where love could come visit without stealing the silver. People ask me, women my age at the knitting table or younger ones on the bus, how I did it. I want to tell them there is no single courage. Courage is the sum of small obediences to your own life. It is counting the invisible labor like you would count stitches, because work done in silence still holds the garment together. It is naming the pattern when someone tries to rename theft as sharing. It is picking a date and telling one ally the plan. It is walking into a bank and asking a stranger with a nameplate to help you write your name on a future. It is turning a phone off until you can hear your own mind. It is choosing a key over a permission slip. It is leaving the house that calls you free while it costs you everything. If you are watching this because you too have become background in your own home, know this, the fear of loneliness is loud because it has a microphone. Peace is quiet because it has nothing to prove. Try a week in the house of your friend. Try one afternoon at the park bench, across from a window that could be yours. Try walking into a listing just to feel the light on your face and see whether your shoulders remember how to drop. Try writing the back of envelope plan. There is a version of ordinary that is waiting to meet you, and it has your exact name on the buzzer. I keep promises to myself now, the way I used to keep everyone else's calendar. I eat at the table instead of over the sink. I open the window each morning, even when the air is cranky. I keep fresh flowers when money and season allow, and a sprig of green when they don't. I spend from my savings with caution and permission, buying what makes this small place more mine. A lamp that makes books readable at dusk, a better pan for eggs, a sturdy umbrella I won't lose. I forgive often, I forget rarely, I sleep when I am ready, not when I am allowed. When the lock clicks at night, I hear a word that used to be a question and is now an answer, mine. Sometimes I look back and measure the 20 years I lived as usefulness. I could call them wasted. I don't. They were education, expensive but thorough. They taught me the unit price of self-betrayal and the bulk discount of self-respect. They taught me that some people will love you as long as you supply the life they ordered, and that family without gratitude is just an economy. They taught me that friends, one Linda will do, are the kin you earn by showing up with a pot of soup and the truth. They taught me that I am kinder and braver than my fear wanted me to believe. That is not a waste. That is a harvest I am finally eating. If you made it here with me, through kitchens and banks and lobbies and parks, thank you for your time, your ears, your heart. May your own rooms fill with the kind of quiet that strengthens you. May your hands learn the weight of keys that open only the doors you choose. May your health hold you steady, and your family, born or chosen, meet you with respect. And if this story helped you or someone you love, if it reminded you to count your contributions, to name the pattern, to make a plan, to pick a date, to ask one ally, to choose your key, then stay with me. There are more doors to open. Subscribe if you'd like to hear the next one. I'll be here, by my window, with the park in the frame, and a kettle that knows my name.